Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes, just waiting for a few more people to join, and then we will get going. Okay, I think let's get going. Firstly, and most importantly, thank you very much for taking the time to come and join us on today's webinar. For those that don't know me, my name is Ian Gibbons, and I am the CEO of FoxTech. At FoxTech, we specialise in helping mid-size financial and professional service firms strengthen their cybersecurity posture. That means not just ticking compliance boxes, but genuinely reducing risk through proactive testing, governance alignment, and most importantly, a focus on the human side of security. And that's exactly why we've chosen today's topic, because the biggest cybersecurity threats to your business may not be an external hacker or a zero-day exploit. More often than not, it's something that's already happening inside your organization. So if you think about it, if you've got an employee that is using the same passwords for their personal accounts as they are their work accounts, or the team have spun up a bit of infrastructure to do a very specific job for a project, then project completes, and 5 years later, that bit of infrastructure is still there, unpatched, unloved, but open to the internet. And now, while clearly none of these things are malicious, it's those kind of actions that often leave doors open for attacks. And of course, those open doors are usually the ones that are exploited first. So over the next hour or so, we're going to explore these human-driven risks in detail. We'll look at some of the attacks, the types of attacks that are happening out in the field, and we'll share real stories showing how these innocent actions can often spiral into major incidents. Most importantly, we'll also be taking you through practical steps that you can take now to close those human risk gaps before they become breaches. So I'm joined today by a fantastic panel who bring a wealth of experience and perspectives, and I'll introduce them in just one moment. But as I go through, or as we go through today's discussion, I think the thing that I'd really ask you to think about is, if the biggest risk is already inside your organization, what can you do differently to help defend against it? And that's the conversation we're going to have today. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel. So, first off, we have got Petra Vincent. Petra is a technology leader and digital strategist with over 15 years experience helping major firms like PwC, Intel, Novartis design secure, scalable systems. Petra's led DevOps and digital transformation programs at enterprise scale, balancing speed, compliance, and security. She's a particular focus on reducing human error and shadow IT risk. She's even won Webbies and digital awards for her work. Alongside all that great stuff, Petra also advises startups, translating enterprise best practice into practical strategies for growth. So Petra will bring perspective of how governance, design, and leadership can reduce internal risks. So welcome, Petra. Next, we have our very own Anthony Green, who's the CTO of FoxTech. Anthony's a CREST practitioner and recognised thought leader who's designed and implemented some of the UK's most secure systems, working with global corporations, government, mid-sized firms alike. With a background that spans development, infrastructure and security, Anthony's known for kind of cutting through bad security practices and focusing on what really works, whether that's password policies, stronger monitoring, or modern SOC services. Anthony's going to bring a technical perspective to today's discussion, including how attackers exploit the gaps and how firms can close them. So welcome, Anthony. Now, for the eagle eyes amongst us, you'll notice that while Lisa Ventura was due to join us today, unfortunately she has got COVID, and so we wish her a speedy recovery. And I'll thank Matthew for stepping in at the last moment to help us out. Matthew brings just a wealth of experience. He is got over 20 years experience in cybersecurity. Matthew's led global blockchain projects, strengthened UK's critical national infrastructure, modernised some of the country's most complex systems. He's a recognised expert in theme and identity access management, helping organisations of all sizes. And while he's known for tackling some of the toughest challenges, the thing that always makes Matthew a pleasure to work with is that any technical solutions can only be accomplished by a steady supply of Jaffa cakes. He loves a Jaffa cake. And so I love working with you. So, quick bit of admin. For those that aren't familiar with the Teams platform, there is a Q&A icon up at the top. If you've got any questions along the way, please do just drop them in the Q&A section, and we will answer them as and when they're raised. Of course, we'll obviously make some time at the end to go over any questions anyone may have also. So, having gone through all of that, let's actually get into some discussion. So let's start off, Petra. So obviously we've said quite a lot about the fact that it's human risk that we're talking about, but to you, within an organisation, what does human risk really mean in practice?
So human risk is usually not from bad actors. They're not from people that are coming in and just saying, okay, I want to hack the system, break it, or do something malicious in this space. It usually comes from when someone's trying to find an easier route, when teams are incentivized to move really fast without any guardrails, and then they start to bypass controls. It's, I am working on a project with a team member and we don't have enough licenses, so we're going to share a password. Or it is, I completely forget my password all the time, so I am just going to write it down somewhere and then just change the last digit, or the last character of every password as we keep going along. And it is also, and I've seen a lot, always worked in a dev environment. So working with remote developers, working with remote teams, trying to do things really quickly. So there's always someone trying to bypass the system,
Yes.
to make life a lot easier. So, for me, it is, what happens every day to make life a little bit simpler, and you're not thinking through it. And that is where, we usually get a lot of human risk coming into security. So, when on my end, it is always kind of looking at it on what would someone need easy access to, and how can we try to solve for those issues internally so that we're not having people trying to find quick ways around
Sure.
the system.
Okay, And interesting around incentives. I think that a lot of the time the incentives are wrong, and they almost encourage bad practice. Anthony, is that something you've had experience of, and any experiences you'd like to share there?
Yes, absolutely. I think incentives is something that's super important when thinking about security in a company. When when people within an organization are given the wrong incentives, then it can encourage them to do things which are fundamentally not particularly secure. And this, I think, occurs in lots of different ways inside an organization. So that can be at the individual person on the ground level of the tools that they want and the tools that they need to use to do their job. Make it too hard, and they'll find ways around it. So, a great example is file sharing. Someone needs to get a file across to someone in another organization. They need it to be able to do, to do their work, to do their job. If the tools that the company provides don't have a mechanism to do that because it's all been locked down so much, then it's so easy for someone just to spin up Dropbox or use WeTransfer or something like this that, whilst might not be insecure in its own right, it's completely outside the visibility then of the IT teams and the security controls, and you can easily end up in a situation where the organization thinks it's very, very well tied down in how it's controlling its data because the systems that it's providing are very well tied down. And meanwhile, staff are busy trying to get their work done and are spinning up Dropbox file shares to get to transfer things from one to another or that type of thing, whilst the organization is unaware. And I think that drives into another big part of incentives, which is culture within an organization. It's really important to encourage a culture of things may not be perfect. There'll be things we don't get right, but discussion and reporting them is just super important. One of the things that we've seen when we've gone and done security reviews of companies, for example, we've done supply due diligence reviews, is you can sometimes end up with this big disparity between what the leadership team think is happening and what's actually happening on the ground. So someone's produced lots of great policies and procedures, and they've said, yeah, it's really strong. Look, this is what's here. And then you go and start digging and asking people who do the day-to-day job, and you discover that there's this big gap. And sometimes this happens because of culture, where there's this culture of compliance that everything's got to be 100%. If you do something that's not according to the rules, you're going to get absolutely slapped. People don't ask these kind of questions. People don't put their hand up and say, sorry, I use Dropbox because the tools that you're providing don't let me do my job. And that can create these very hidden risks.
Absolutely. And Matthew, I know yourself that you run vCISO services for some of our clients. And as part of that, you run security working groups, which is exactly the kind of forum that Anthony's talking about as the place to raise concerns. Do you see a theme in that bad culture, if we can call it that, but also a theme on the most common types of issues that are raised and not necessarily expected by the management team?
Yes, I think there's a couple of things I'll go over from, first of all, what Petra was saying about this generally not being malicious. So people don't tend to set about to hack things, to make things insecure, but they'll bring in behaviors from where they worked before, where communicating on WhatsApp was fine, whereas in some other organization it's definitely not fine. You can't just share files over that. You have to do it the official way. So it's not evildoers. It's people trying to do their job the best way they can and bringing that forward. And where we found security working groups to be most successful in organizations as part of the vCISO stuff that we do, is where you start to encourage that reporting behavior that Anthony was talking about by saying, hey, I've done this isn't very good, can we think about a way of doing this better? And your answer might not be, or we have something for you ready to go right now, here you go. It could be, well, we'll go away and look at that and make a product for you, but we're now aware of the risk, and security is all about risk. So once you've identified, hey, people are using this, you can take a view on it to say, it's not so bad now, but we probably should fix this within 3 months, right? So you might not want to kind of put the doors down straight away and slam it shut, but you know what's going on. This is the important thing. So you can take an immediate view, and you can take a medium-term view on how you want to fix it.
Okay, no, that's really good. Petra, anything you want to kind of add to that before we move on?
Definitely all of that. It is, it's I think the biggest thing, as you guys have mentioned, is kind of training, making the issues very much aware. So letting people know, if you do this, this is what happens, because I don't think that any of this, as you've mentioned, comes from a bad place. It just comes from a place of actually not knowing that if I'm using a screen sharing program, I can give access to, my company system, which can be something that can be detrimental, to the health of our company. So I think it's framing it, and then people will get it, and consistent training behind it.
So on the training, I think that's a really important issue. Perhaps something you want to expand on, but I think historically there's always been a culture of, particularly when it's required for a regulatory framework, but there'll be annual training, whether that's cybersecurity or whether that's GDPR or whatever it happens to be, and big old test once a year. I think that's proven to be ineffective, and it's now more micro learning. What's your experiences there, Petra? Have you been involved in setting up kind of training programs like that, or what's your experience from organizations that might have done that?
Yes, I was actually on a team that created phishing questions.
There you go.
Trying to figure out ways to, trick employees into clicking on a button to do something. I think when it's persistent, and it's not just in an annual space where there is, either, at my last firm, we would do phishing tests at least once a week. And we would randomize it across the firm. So, you had no idea if you were getting it. And after something happened 3 times, then you would have to take some form of training, which I think resonated because, when there is some type of accountability that, that has to be made for, not following these spaces, or, not taking the most secure steps, I think that works the best. We've had things where if you didn't take this training, your email will get shut down within by the end of the day. So there were things that were put into place so that, we had a bit more accountability in the space. So now I walk into everything with this, I don't need my email to shut down, or is this a phishing email? And it takes time, but it can't be something that we're doing once a year. It needs to be something that is kind of, going back to the culture of the firm or the culture of the organization. It has to be something that's embedded into the organization and done frequently.
Yeah. And Anthony, anything around how an organization might go about embedding that kind of training, that bite-sized training?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, as Petra said, one of the important things with cybersecurity training is to make it, it needs to be something that keeps reminding people, but isn't taking too much time. So really short bite-sized pieces that happen through the year of sort of formal training, I think is, in my view, very much the way to go. You get reminded on small little topics as you go through the year, focused on the things that are the highest risks for the organization. And what's the highest risk is great if that's driven by monitoring within the organization to determine what threats the organization's facing, right? It's much more impactful if you can do training that says, hey, this thing is happening right now inside the organization, this particular type of phishing attack or this particular type of threat, and then providing that training there and then to users that's relevant to things that are happening right now. I think that can be very powerful. I think there's also a big part of it is it being embedded in part of the culture. So people are expected to do the training. People are, managers encourage it. It's checked. It's not just a stick that people are poked with. There's the expectation and culture within the organisation that, hey, we should be doing these things properly. And if you're not sure how to do things securely, ask a manager. It's fine. So I think that's really important.
So one of the topics that you raised there, Petra, was around phishing, and Matthew, I'll throw this one your direction.
Go for it.
So phishing seems to remain kind of one of the most common and successful attack vectors.
Mhm.
Why is it so successful?
I'll start by quoting a very recent example that we had with one of our clients, where the reason it was successful, it was because one of their contacts had in turn been compromised. So the email came from a trusted source, someone they dealt with day to day. They didn't know that their account was compromised, so they didn't know the email that just came from them had a phishing URL in it. So they were saying, "Oh, I'll just click this. It's something I expect to see. I'll fill in my details," and then suddenly the penny drops and the heart sinks. And then I think they did exactly the right thing in this case, is they said, they owned up, they called IT, they said, "Hey, I've done something wrong." And this all goes back to communication, and the thing that we see as working best for security working groups is saying, "Hey, I've made a mistake, I've done something wrong," and there should be that freedom to own up, to say that they've done that. So why is it more prevalent? Because people are sneaky at getting these attacks in, right? They will come from avenues that you expect. So if you're a financial services organization, they might create a website that looks very similar to something like an auditor or something that you might expect to come something. It might have one letter wrong in the URL, right? Very, very similar looking URL that you then go to and think it's normal, and it's very convincing. So yeah, sneakiness, I'd say, is probably the biggest thing that gets phishing into the organizations.
No.
I mean, very much the organisations, the attackers that are doing these phishing attacks. I mean, this is what they do for a living. They're good at persuasion. They're good at social engineering, and there's lots of different routes that they can, avenues that they can try and use. So there's phishing, which is sending emails. There's and I think even with the good companies, a typical kind of click-through rate on phishing simulations is a few percent. Right? So it's like 4 or 5%. So that says even if you're a good organisation with good phishing training in place and well-educated staff, if you've got 400 or 500 people in your organisation, you're going to get 20 or so click on any given phishing email that gets through. And when you put it like that, you realise that it's challenging, and so you kind of have to work on the assumption that people will click on phishing emails. People will occasionally give up their credentials, and so that kind of frames the problem, I think, in a different way, which is, yes, this training is obviously important because it helps give reporting and you find out about these things. In the case that Matthew was talking about, the fact they reported it meant we could investigate it. We could see who else in the organization has received the same link. We could look in much more detail at that particular person's logins and see whether the credentials have been picked up. We can make sure that the passwords have been reset, check whether MFA has been compromised, and all these kinds of things. But the fact that it's so prevalent and so plausible that credentials get compromised, I think shows that you have to have ways of think about how you're going to defend that and what you're going to do when that actually happens.
Yeah, and I guess also how far back you need to go in order to trace, because of course the point that someone was phished and the point that it's exploited, on average it's 207 days, right? So that's a long period of time, and your 1 month of defender logs isn't going to cut it.
No, absolutely. We've certainly seen customers who have realised that one of their accounts has been phished because something happened, but then they've not been able to investigate what's happened because they're relying on, say, the out-of-the-box Microsoft 365 logs, which go 30 days, I think, for the majority. And so they've not been able to go back far enough to go, well, actually, how long has this account been compromised? What data have they looked at?
Yeah.
And so that is a real risk, I think, for many organizations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one thing I would say, sorry, is just really reactive. One phishing that we saw in the beginning of summer was someone texting and saying, "Oh, the leader, the leadership team needed a gift card. Can you do it right away?" And they had access to every single person on that team. This was a small IT MSP, and what was really great about how they managed scenarios like this was as soon as someone saw it, and he realized that this was in fact a scam, they put it in the team's channel. So it basically publicly blasted everyone there because within a few minutes, you probably had about 10 people on the team who got the same text message and was already emailing or reaching out saying, is this real? So I think taking action and, being very visual with what's happening within, things that attacks and what have you, and not trying to keep them under wraps because you don't want people to feel like your system is vulnerable. The more, visibility that you give on what's happening or what could happen, it's better, especially within a large organization, ways to get information out. So if someone does get hit with, a phishing scam, that they can actually report it really quickly, and it can be very visible within the org so that if someone else sees it, they can react really quickly. Because, as you mentioned, it does take a really long time to find out, but it actually really doesn't take a long time for people to start to adopt, and you run away with that scam. So,
yeah. If it's a gift card or a voucher, it's a scam.
We saw that in the example that I posted, that there was the email was scattered to a few people, and the first person that shouted, we were able to go in to the tooling and just pull the emails out of everyone's inbox. So everyone else that got it, just get rid of it. So it's a really good example of shout early, and you can do something about it. Yeah.
Visibility is very important.
No, absolutely. One thing I was going to ask you about, Petra, is that, so while we've kind of focused on email there, of course, phishing is evolving, and you've got text and now, of course, AI as well. How have you seen phishing evolving? I was wait to say over the last couple of years, but I mean, in a matter of months, it can change. But what kind of evolutions have you seen around phishing?
That it's actually it's leaving the box of it's like leaving a computer box, so right, it's no longer, an email. It's now either a text message, a phone call. I think we've all gotten the phone calls that are just like, hey, please, this information's missing or what have you. And what's made it even worse now is AI, because AI can give predictive analysis. So it can really understand how someone's going to respond and respond right away back to it. So I think that is what is very different from when even I started. And it was just a really smart person with a lot of time on their hands coming up with, some of the responses and reactions. Now you're competing against, an infinite machine that can think of every single scenario or response. So now this is like when due diligence is really, really important, and that foundational education on no one's going to ask you for a gift card or a voucher, little things like that. It comes in really important I think just kind of going back to the human way of, using your instincts to try to detect, does this sound right? We're getting for transit, for example, here with the tolls, where I've seen text messages come in from a European, telephone code. And I'm like, I don't understand why, someone in the UK will be emailing me or text messaging me about, toll tickets here in good old New York. So, you really have to now become a little bit more, just savvy in, trying to say, does this even seem right? Does this make sense? Who's it coming from? Does it make sense to come from this person? Or sometimes even looking at numbers. If you're getting calls in, I would look them up before even answering at times, because spam likely no longer shows up. I don't
Yeah,
know.
no, absolutely. Okay, so before we kind of move on to how organizations take measures to protect themselves beyond training, I think what most people find quite interesting is how so if a company has been subjected to a phishing attack and those credentials have been exploited, then what happens next? What typically does an attacker do with that? So I'm thinking about business email compromise attack, but there are many other scenarios. Anthony, do you want to just talk us through some of the most common things that will happen post breach?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think firstly, there's what route in that they're taking. So at a most simple level, if they're phishing for credentials, then a user might get directed to a phishing page. They put in their username and their password, thinking it's a Microsoft login page. If they're using MFA, they might then also ask for the 6-digit code from your authenticator app. And then the attackers then got those credentials and the MFA, and can then log straight into their Microsoft account as if they were the end user. So having got in, there's then various actions that an attacker might take. So that's kind of called initial access. Once you've got in, you then work out what is it you're going to do with that. And often it's different criminal organizations that do these different parts. So there's people that specialize sometimes in getting the initial access. The next step could vary depending on the particular company. So if an attacker's got some credentials, there's several things that they could go on and do. They may go and just sell it on the black market to other criminal organizations that decide what else they're going to do with it. They could use it as part of a more sophisticated campaign. So having got into one person's account in the organization, you're then in a much more powerful position to do social engineering attacks against other people in the organization. So this is business email compromise. You've got one person's account compromised. You then use that to try and talk to other people in the organization to get further compromise. So that further compromise might be you persuade someone else to give up their credentials. You might monitor the particular process that person does. So you've got an accounts person, you monitor how they deal with invoices, how they pay suppliers. And then once you've got an idea for how they pay their suppliers and how they deal with invoices, you've now got a foothold in the organization. You could send an email, a very convincing email, from this account that you've compromised to the accounts department and say, hey, the bank account for this really large £100,000 payment has changed. Here's the new details. And then you may be able to get lots of money by doing that, because they then pay the wrong person and you suddenly got yourself £100,000 as an attacker. So that's another potential step. Another potential route would be to move on to, say, ransomware. Again, now you've got enough foothold inside the organization. You could have a scenario like Matthew was talking about earlier. You realize that this person talks to lots of other companies that are much higher value. And so you use that account to send a very convincing share a phishing PDF to all of that person's contacts. And now it's really convincing because it's come from the real account of someone that those other suppliers or customers trust. And therefore you might use it then to hop onto other people. They may also use it to, say, deploy ransomware. Again, you could potentially upload ransomware onto a file share and then persuade people to open it. You might be able to use it to log onto other systems. You've got the username and password. Maybe the same person's also using it for their VPN or for their bank or for MailChimp or for their social media account or for remote desktop login to something important. You're now potentially hopping onto machines inside the company network and then able to then maybe sniff more credentials or compromise something inside the network, because now you've got access to a machine inside the company network. So then this is all called lateral movement. You start moving around through the network, seeing where else you can compromise until effectively you find something, or I think the attacker finds something that allows them to achieve their aim, which may be reselling access to someone else. It may be deploying ransomware and asking you for a ransom. It may be leaking your data. It may be just using your organization as a hopping point onto your customers, your suppliers, other people. And that's why there can be this big lag of a couple of 100 days, right? So from the initial access, they sort of, if they don't get detected, they'll lay low and see if they can use that to gain more access, move about until they find something that's got real value to the attacker, and then they strike and do the damage.
And I think it's also worth saying that, of course, a lot of the time when that initial attack takes place, the attacker doesn't actually know what the end exploit is going to be, and so it is ever more rare that an attacker specifically trying to target your organization. It's any organization that happens to fall in foul of the phish or the exploit that they know how to use, and it's all about reducing that kind of attack surface.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point to make, which is particularly for smaller organizations, people often think, hey, no one's going to target us. We're small. We're not that significant. You know, there's bigger companies that people will try and target. But in many cases, the people that are performing these attacks, or at least to get that initial access, they have a method that they know how to do, how to exploit, whether that's scanning the internet for a particular kind of vulnerability, or they've honed and perfected the art of sending phishing emails, or they've created a great phishing PDF or piece of malware or something like that. They have a thing that they know how to do to get that initial access, and they will just spray it anywhere that they can to try and get that initial access. And then it'll often just get sold on. They'll either use it themselves or sell it on to other people to make use of it. So how valuable you are often affects what happens next more than whether you're going to get the initial attacks. There's always exceptions, but
I feel the need to put in a blatant plug at this point, which is FoxTech do have a completely free service. So I say a plug. It's a free service called Cybersecurity, and what Cybersecurity does is it looks at that external threat landscape. We've run it against over 20,000 different organizations now. And so we will take all the findings that we have in your organization using open source intelligence, which is exactly what the hackers do. And then we rank that against the other 20,000 organizations. So you can see instantly kind of where you sit. Obviously, it doesn't mean that you will get attacked or won't get attacked, but it does show what a hacker sees, and therefore you can take action to resolve. Because if you don't know what's wrong, how can you possibly fix it? Okay, so moving on just slightly. So one of the big protections is having MFA. MFA certainly isn't foolproof, but nonetheless, it's a critical tool in the armory to protect your organization. But Matthew, could you maybe just explain some of the ways that MFA is getting bypassed and compromised, and then what things organizations can do to help protect themselves?
Sure. So I think at the start there's lots of varieties of MFA, and they have various strengths and weaknesses. And MFA has evolved over the years to be a lot more secure in some cases, and that means that certain MFA methods have been are quite poor now. So an email delivery of a passcode is probably on the poor side, whereas responding to a push notification in an app, or even better using YubiKey or something like that, would be far better. So
And
what
sorry,
we're
just for some listeners, what is a YubiKey?
it's a little hardware token that has a key on it that is physical. So it's something that you have, you plug into your laptop, and it prompts you, hey, you're logging into this, click the button on the key, put in your PIN, and then we'll take the key from the physical device. So these things are called phish resistant MFA, which means even if it's extremely unlikely that it would be compromised during a standard phishing attack, because you need to have something physically there. Either the key is embedded in your laptop's security module, or it's on one of these physical tokens. So what I would say as advice for MFA is have a look at the methods that you're using in the organization. So see if you're using kind of outdated stuff, and maybe if you target some of the people in the organization that have perhaps more access to sensitive information or your source code, for example, you might want to start giving them these tokens to say, use these for your authentication rather than using an app, rather than using an email delivered code, as they're far more resistant to phishing attempts.
Yeah, and I think it's probably important to sort of quickly describe how these are more resistant to typical phishing attacks. So we talked about a scenario a bit earlier where how does a simple phishing attack work? You get an email, you go to a site, ask you for your username and password, you put it in. Well, those authentication methods that involve you typing something into a page, like an MFA code that's delivered by email or SMS or from an authenticator app, those can be collected just like your password can. Now, obviously, it's time limited, so the attacker's got to use it right away. But nonetheless, if you can convince someone to type in their authentication code into a malicious website, then the attacker's got everything they need. They've got password, they've got the MFA code, they can log in straight away. Now, the advantage with MFA is time limited, so they've got to do it right away. It doesn't necessarily give them persistent access, so they've got to be quick. But attackers are dealing with that.
It's often scripted, yeah. So as soon as you put it in, yeah.
And you can buy there's phishing kits about that will kind of automate that process for you, or for the attacker. That's phishing as a service. The criminal underworld is as into SaaS as everyone else is. But things like YubiKeys, passkeys, there's lots of different words for similar thing. WebAuthn, FIDO, YubiKeys, passkeys, Windows Hello for Business, all of these things, they are phishing resistant because the key is tightly coupled to the URL on which you log in. So when you use your YubiKey or a passkey or something like that, you're not typing something into the app. Your web browser is talking to the key, and the key won't release the key. The passkey won't release the credential to anything other than the real site. So that means even if you went to a malicious site and it asked you, your hardware encryption key would not release the required key to the phishing site because it's on a different URL. So that's what makes it phishing resistant. And that is a lot more robust. And so for really sensitive things like privileged access accounts, global administrator, where the impact of a phishing attack can be devastating for an organization, then I'd be recommending that people should be looking at using these phishing resistant methods and starting to try and enforce them. There's some other intermediate things which are also very good, like the Microsoft app and so on. But really, that's the way those really high sensitive accounts should be going.
Okay, and Petra, given that these kind of solutions are comparatively very cheap, especially when you consider the potential consequence of not having them, still the kind of uptake seems very low. And I was just wondering whether you've got experience or any advice in terms of organizationally, how do we get these kind of phishing resistant MFA solutions better understood, get them into organizations, into companies, getting them actually used. Because the other thing that I certainly seen is, thou shall have, but in reality, no one has, other than, as Anthony suggested, the global admin, and that's it, for a token, a hardware key that can be as little as £5. So how organizationally do we get the message to that trickle down into organizations that this is a good thing and it needs to be adopted and encouraged?
A few different ways. I think it's within your smaller teams. So team leads, making sure that it is enforced from a cellular level, but then also from an organizational level, making sure that there is education around it, that you do have systems in place that does not make it more complex. And that when people are doing specific things, that they understand what they're doing. So, for instance, I've been in, large organizations that's rolled out a new system once a year, so it's when you're in a space and you're trying to get, a specific task done, and every week or every couple months, there's an entirely new way for you to be able to access something that is counterproductive. So, when we are implementing these systems and really thinking about how it's going to affect every single part of the organization, and then making decisions based on, what makes the most sense across the board. So if your accounting team needs a different level of access than your developers, than your admins, you really have to think about what that looks like and how they're accessing it and what they're doing. Because if the system or the MFA system that you have makes no sense, in some of these spaces, then it's going to fail, because now you're going to have people that will try to find other ways to, log in, to get in. And, that's the one thing that you have to solve for, is just making sure that it works fully across, and that adoption period is being done, more on, it's being encouraged from your team members, it's being encouraged from your direct lead. And there is consistent just knowledge around why you're doing certain things, how certain systems affect you, and finding ways, learning the patterns of your workers to understand how they're accessing. If you have a mostly remote team, finding solutions that work well remotely. That if no matter where I'm at in the world, it makes sense. Some people may not have access to cell phones all the time, or, even just the service. So, thinking through ways of being able to do some form of authentication that can be done either manually, offline, so you have to think about all these circumstances to really understand, okay, what can we fortify against, and then making that simple, because the minute it becomes complex, then you're gonna have people not wanting to adopt it as easily, and it shouldn't be complex at all. It should be something that I should be able to do, log in, get in our systems, and it should be 100% secure, but it shouldn't be something that takes 10 minutes. And I think we've all been there, on the great, like, Windows lockdown, and then you have to kind of take about 15 minutes to restart your computer and do all the things. By that time, I'm either trying to find another solution, or I'm just exhausted.
Yeah. And it's that finding another solution that often opens the greatest risks, right?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think making these sorts of things appealing to people, like for me as a techie, as a bit of a geek, saying I get a new bit of kit is actually really cool.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, go on, let's do it. But making it easy, as you say, Petra, making it fluid and seamless to log on. Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So taking another step forward then, and just picking up on what you said, Petra, about finding another way, brings my mind to kind of shadow IT. But before we talk about shadow IT, because one of the latest threats is shadow AI. And again, Petra, I want if you would explain what shadow AI is and how it's impacting businesses, or potentially impacting businesses.
Well, so basically, it is, basically it's we need to set clear data because shadow IT is just information that is not consistent or persistent within or real. So it kind of sits on the back end and it can do, different things within your environments without your knowledge. And I would just say that we need to set clear boundaries on which data can and cannot be shared across tools, and let have like a system where we have approved tools that can be leveraged so that people are not downloading software or go into specific sites. I've seen a breach happen with someone trying to download a YouTube video and encrypt and trying to get it off of YouTube. So basically put in a pretty confidential video um, on a website, to get it downloaded, and then that actually ended up breaching a system. So I think it goes back to just the education around what tools we use, and what can and cannot be shared within a company space with tools like Microsoft. You can set certain permissions on documents. So whether it's something that is public, private, confidential, so that when, documents are being shared across, they're already coming in with a specific criteria. So, leveraging systems like that so that, even if I make the human error of sharing it, the person on the other end, cannot access it. And, that goes across even some of the simplest systems like, a Google Drive or what have you. You can fortify and safeguard files so that, there isn't that mistake in being able to share or access specific software or files.
Yeah, and so thinking about that kind of how you protect the organisation, maybe culturally. Uh, so Matthew, one of the common things that I know we've come across is where AI is not being enabled for security purposes within an organisation, and so what the user does is copies and pastes or manually retypes sensitive information in their own personal ChatGPT account or Copilot. Many other AI assistants are available, and ask the question to, can you rewrite this email for me, please? And the email happens to have bank details in it, or personal information, or corporate strategy, or whatever. And all of a sudden, that's now out in the open. Culturally, is there things that we can do to help fix that? Because clearly, you can't stop humans being human. But maybe this goes back to the training. I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
I think a lot of the time, so what we saw when AI first came out was some of the companies just immediately put the doors down and said, no, you cannot use it. There wasn't really an acknowledgement that, hey, these tools are really, really useful, but as an organization, you need to understand the risks that they bring. So for the likes of Copilot, for Microsoft Copilot, you can contain the data that's used by it to only your organizational data, right? You can, and that won't go out. There's technical controls in place to do it. Culturally, getting across that you shouldn't leak information out is actually quite hard, because if someone is very determined, they will always find a way. So there are other technical controls you can put in place, like data loss prevention software that will notice if someone's sending stuff to their Gmail account or to then use on AI tools out of the thing, so you can spot these keywords or spot certain data as it's going out, and then have that as a security incident which you then investigate and kind of tell them off about it. But being upfront with people saying, hey, we know this AI stuff is useful, we're working on a solution, but for now you limit yourself to these tools that we've approved, and making sure that approach goes out very quickly at the start when people start to use it. And I certainly saw this when ChatGPT first came out, that everyone was like, oh, this is cool, it's cool, right? Like, well, it's sucking in all your information, and that's now online, so don't use it.
I agree with Matthew. I think blocking it, going kind of with a zero trust in the beginning as an organization, works really well. So if I can't access it, until we have further information or education around it, it's the best way to go. Most organizations that I've been in, when something new comes out, like AI, for instance, like AI with images, it's basically a strong rule. You cannot use any AI images, until we figure out, the integrity of these images, and we have like a protocol across the company that, allows us to be able to use it with intention and for it to make sense. And it's the same thing as, anything else like, ChatGPT or any form of software that makes something much easier. I think just blocking it from the beginning. And then also using technology to be able to fish out if certain words are being used, certain terms, so that information is not being leaked. And then once they have the education, and you may have a tool that can be used internally, that securely, then you can release it and adopt it. I've also seen most recently an organization that released a very secure internal one, as far as like GPT, and then you can switch out to external. So it still allows you to leverage, the external space, but it does it with some guardrails. So I feel more comfortable if I want a wider search outside, that the information that our confidential information will not be leaked out, but you'll still feel like you're getting the full force of using these tools, because that's usually why people go outside the
Do it
firewalls.
in the first place. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, unbelievably, we've only got a couple of minutes left. So, Ant, I'm going to ask you a very quick question, because I know we get asked it an awful lot,
Mhm.
and you've got 30 seconds to answer.
Okay.
Forcing users to regularly change passwords. Typically, this is on a 90-day cycle. Good idea or bad idea?
Terrible idea. So in the remaining 20 seconds, passwords these days are generally compromised by people using the same password on multiple sites, and another site that you've used the password in getting compromised, and then that being then used to attack the other places you use the same password. So that says you should use different passwords on each site, and they should be passwords that are good and memorable. And changing your password every 90 days does not encourage you to have different passwords on each site, and for that to be good and memorable.
Indeed. I think the two takeaways are different platform, different password. And the other one, we don't particularly have time just now to go into it. I'm sure we'll cover it another time. But is 3 random words for passwords. The NCSE is fabulous guidance. Anyone can go and look at it.
Or use a password manager.
Or use a
I was
password
just about
manager.
to say
Even
that.
better. Yes. Okay, so we're nearly out of time. Let's do a very quick round the room. If there's one action that a firm should take today to help reduce their cyber risk, what would your advice be, Petra?
Education, and just make it visible, make it accessible, easily accessible.
Cracking. Matthew?
Talk to your people, find out where their bodies are. Go low level, find out what people are really doing compared to what they say they're doing or what policy says they're doing. Then you can understand your risk properly.
Anthony?
Think about what would happen in your organization if a user's credentials were compromised, and what you would do next.
Nice. All right. In which case, thank you very much, Petra, Matthew, Anthony. I think I've found that really interesting. Some fabulous insights, and most importantly, some things that people can actually take away. I know George has put in the chat links to where you can access cyber risk and your guys' profiles. We will stay online for the next couple of minutes. If anyone has any questions they would like to ask any one of us, then please do put that in the Q&A, and we will answer. Other than that, all that remains is to say thank you very much to everyone, and hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you for the next webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
I have undone the microphones. If anyone wants to talk or ask us a question, they're welcome to do so, or put it in the chat.
No. I guess we did an excellent job covering it all, though.
We've got one
Oh,
question in the Q&A.
Oh,
What is the first thing you should do if you're compromised? I'm going to let Matthew take the lead on that one.
Tell your security team, and they will probably tell you straight away to change your password. That's the most likely thing, unless your device is also compromised, in which case I'll tell you to change it on an uncompromised device. But yeah, tell your security team, but let them work with you.
all right. In which case, that's a good note to end on. Thank you all, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Thanks all.
Thanks. Bye.